What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of State of the Nation, the Athletics Raiders podcast. We're here in Alameda. I'm Jimmy Durkin, joined by Vic Tafer. We just got out of Kolton Miller's introductory press conference. And Vic, before we get into that, how did you enjoy day one of the draft out here in Alameda?
It was cool. There was a lot of build-up, a lot of talk about all these trades possibility happening, and obviously the four quarterbacks. But I think for the Raiders, probably a little anticlimactic. I think Raider fans probably weren't happy with what they got. All the big names were either gone or they didn't take them. They went with a tackle. So I thought it was fine. I mean, obviously I thought tackle was the way they were going to go, so I wasn't too surprised. Definitely not the sexy pick. I get that. Yeah. But, this business is about, making sure your quarterback can stand up and throw the ball. So I think that's part of it. And it's a big dude. We saw today. He's huge. So,
at what point did you kind of reach the understanding and thinking that the tackle was where they were going to go? I know you really, throughout the process, had written about, they could trade down and go tackle. I think we probably maybe expected more of a trade down if that was going to be the route they were going to go. It seemed like in the last couple of days before the draft started that's when the momentum started coming that, okay, tackle maybe even at that number 10 spot could be where they were going to go.
Yeah, I think throughout the league you saw, obviously it was a weak tackle class this year, so I think what that did was it pushed the top 2-3 guys up. I think McGlinchey went 9th, which I think maybe a month ago that would have been a little high for people thought, but I think the Niners realized, this is the guy. If we're going to need a guy for right tackle this year, left tackle next year, this is the best guy available. So I think also Miller had a nice offseason in terms of the combine and workouts. He kind of flew up the charts a little bit. So I just think teams realized that if you want one, you got to get one pretty early. And so the Raiders realized that, and say last night, McGlinchey goes 9, so they realized that's the guy they wanted after Smith was gone, the linebacker. Then they realized, okay, so McGlinchey's gone. We picked 10th. They wanted to trade down. But if they didn't trade down, so that there wasn't that option for them, they would have taken Miller 10th. So that shows you just how much they were locked in on getting a tackle.
Does that surprise you? I mean, I know you were kind of on the Minkah Fitzpatrick train. He was there. I mean, they could have brought in a guy that immediately can impact this defense, which we know needs guys that can come in and immediately impact this defense. It's been, you got to go. Is Khalil Mack the last guy that they've drafted that's made an impact on this defense?
Yeah, I like Minkah a lot, and I thought that was really going to be a good fit for them in terms of their defense and what he could bring in terms of playing slot corner, safety, a good blitzer. He was a total package. Obviously, Derek Ansley was with him, Alabama. Yeah. He loved him. But I just think the bottom line was the bottom line. I think besides having a guy who can protect Carr, looked at the financial picture. So you're paying Carr $125 million. You're going to pay Khalil Mack probably same boat. That's a lot of money on two guys. Yeah. So I think in terms of a left tackle, now you have a chance to get one who you can control for 5 or 6 years under the market price. And that's big. Left tackles are expensive, especially veteran guys. So if you can get a guy you can groom, build, and ideally he takes over for Donald Penn next year. Let's say he plays right tackle this year and Donald's the guy for a year. So next year he's a left tackle for the next 4 years. That's good value, and that's key for this team. This team needs good value in terms of the books.
Yeah, you look at what are generally considered the 3 most important positions, and then also the 3 most expensive positions are quarterback, edge rusher, and then left tackle. They've invested heavily in one. They're about to invest heavily in the other. They've invested heavily on that offensive line. Until Donald Penn held out and he kind of got his raise last year, they hadn't spent a ton on left tackle. That was kind of one area that was helping them. They had to give him a little bit more money. Will he get all that money? That's the question that we're going to get into, because obviously this pick, even if John Gruden says it's not about Donald Penn, if it's not a message to Donald Penn, it is. If they are able to get him, they get him, especially not even at the number 10 slot. They get him at the 15 slot, which is a little bit cheaper. They got a 4-year deal, an option to do the 5th year. They can go forward knowing for a while. The question becomes, though, is he a guy that is going to be a franchise left tackle? That's there, and there are some questions there, because I think even though Reggie said that they loved the tape, whereas I think most people believe that it was kind of the freakish stuff he did at the combine that elevated him, the tape was inconsistent and shows a guy that needs some work.
Yeah, if you watched UCLA last year, I did a couple times, you didn't say, wow, that tackle's great, they're in line. Rosenthal was always kind of in a hurry, kind of in trouble. So to me, it reminds me of Darius. I'm not going to compare him to Hayward Bay, but Darius Hayward Bay was on Maryland. They played Cal one year. I'm a Cal guy, so I actually watched the whole game. And I didn't remember him at all. When he got drafted, I'm like, what, he was on the Maryland, the team I watched the whole game? That's a first-round pick? So, that's not a good sign. But obviously, he said he had a slow start last year, Miller. He said obviously came over from right tackle to left tackle and had a rough adjustment. But he's a big guy. He's long. He has good feet. He's a good athlete. He did a great job at the combine in terms of the broad jump and sprints. And so, I mean, like Gruden said today, he has upside. It's hard to find left tackles with upside, and this guy definitely has it. So now it's on Tom Cable, and if he can pull it off, then it was a good pick. And if not, then it was a bad pick.
You know, and obviously when you are talking about your first-round pick and the guy at number 15, upside isn't necessarily the best word you want to hear, right? I mean, you want to have a guy that is a plug-and-play starter when you're drafting high, when you come in with the number 10 pick. They obviously move back to 15, but, I mean, you need – we know what's happened the last few years. I mean, last year they did not really have any plug-and-play starters out of that draft class.
Right.
I mean, Eddie Vanderdoes kind of, 2 years ago – not really plug-and-play starters. They haven't been able to draft guys that are plug-and-play starters in a few years here. And so to hear that he's an upside guy is not the best word you want to hear right now.
Especially when I think the debate in the war room at both 10, and if they would have gone there, but 15 was between Miller and Derwin James, who definitely is a plug-in guy at safety, can rush toward the box and cover a little bit, and is a big hitter. So I think the fact that Raider fans know that now, and they see that he went to the Chargers, a division rival, that's going to be hard. I mean, that's going to be hard when they play him twice a year this year. If Kolton Miller is still kind of adjusting and kind of a hit or miss right tackle, and other guys making plays for the Chargers. So I definitely think that it's a risky move. I think the one you'll always compare those guys in years to come. Like, James is, an all-pro safety, and this guy's not, a great tackle. Then it's a bad thing. So I just think it was clearly a coaches versus scouts thing. The scouts definitely wanted to go defense. Mm-hmm. The coaches and Gruden obviously had the last say, and they wanted a guy to put their left tackle for years to come.
And obviously one thing we're going to be able to really zero in on in another comparison is between Kolton Miller and McGlinchey, because he's going to be right down there playing for the 49ers. And obviously the Raiders did not have the opportunity to draft him, but
the coin toss.
The reason they didn't have the opportunity was the coin toss. Rod Woodson screwed him again.
Rod Woodson, man, he killed him. Yeah, how funny is that? The coin toss determines who gets Mike McGlinchey. That never was in anyone's mind back when that coin was in the air.
It was all about who gets Roquan Smith.
Exactly.
That's what we were all saying.
That's what was over. Both teams need a linebacker, but it just shows you offensive tackles definitely they kind of creep up with the draft boards on draft day. Those two guys definitely did that last night.
Yeah, I mean, and right now everybody says that McGlinchey was the number one prospect, and Miller was the number two, but kind of a distant number two. But who the hell knows, right?
Who the hell knows? Like, Orlando Brown's a guy I like a lot. He had a horrible combine. He's a guy I thought would be a good pick at round two. A guy he's huge, had great tape. He's the opposite of Miller. He had great tape in college. Horrible offseason. Like, couldn't do a push-up, couldn't run, couldn't fall on his face a lot at the combine. So, but again, to me, if, like Reggie says, you look at the tape, not the combine. So that's true. But from what I hear, they don't like him at all. So I don't think Browns was an option or is an option. But if I was a GM, I would have waited till today and gotten Orlando Brown round two, and then we call it genius a couple of years when he's like his dad. So.
Well, I mean, I think the other part of this pick that everyone wants to dissect is the trade, because they moved down from 10 to 15, and I think Raider fans, okay, cool, we're moving down, we're going to pick up some assets, and then you hear the assets. They grab a third rounder and a fifth rounder to move down 5 spots, and you look at relative to some of the other deals. I mean, I know, the Bills and the Buccaneers, that deal with the Bills moving up from 12 to 7. Now, obviously, that's 3 spots higher, so it's a much higher value. But the Bucs get 2 second-rounders in that deal. They also shipped a 7th-rounder away, but they got 2 second-rounders. They got some pretty nice draft capital. The Raiders, with that 3rd-rounder that they then go flip to Martavis Bryant, which we'll get into that, and a 5th-rounder. Do you feel like they got enough value for that pick? I mean, because I think part of it where you feel like maybe they could have been able to get more is that it's not like the Cardinals were coming up to get a safety; they were coming up to get a quarterback. And you think when a team is coming up to get a quarterback, that they should be desperate enough that you can milk them for a little bit more.
You would think so. I think 2 things that probably worked against that were, one, I'm not sure who else wanted to come at that point. The quarterbacks, everybody else is already gone. So I'm not sure who else besides the Cardinals want to move up. Two, the Raiders kind of, it's pretty obvious to read what they were doing at that point. They didn't, I mean, if they're trading down, I think you could say they want to tackle. I mean, I think the buzz was out on McGlinchey, so I think they kind of figured it out. So they were pretty desperate to move down. I think also, Reggie mentioned that the Martavis Bryant thing had been in motion. They had talked about it for a while. It's been, homework was done. So I think he knew a third-round pick would get that trade done. So I'm not sure Reggie went in there demanding a lot. And obviously Arizona didn't, offer a lot. So I just think they're like, you know what? This is what I kind of need. This is what we're going to offer, and that's fine. I think both teams probably, I'm sure the Cardinals were happier about it than Reggie was, but I think Reggie got what he needed, not probably what he could have gotten, but what he needed to get done. And for him, moving down was important and getting at least a third-round pick. So it wasn't a great value. I agree with you. I'm not sure it matters that much in the long run, though, but who knows?
Well, let's talk about the value of that other trade, a third-rounder for Martavis Bryant, a guy who can play. I mean, he's a dynamic receiver when he's on the field. We know 2016 suspended the whole year. He's entering what would going to be his fourth season, fifth year really in the league when you take out that year that he wasn't suspended. So he's on the final year of his rookie deal because the year he suspended doesn't count. So making $1.9 million. And gives the Raiders a number 3 receiver, which they need, and we'll get into kind of what this means for Seth Roberts. But a third-round pick for a guy who they've got locked up for 1 year, the guy who has kind of played a little bit second fiddle, is not maybe the best locker room guy. We know he's had some issues back there. What do you think about that trade?
Last night before I went to bed, I didn't like it. I was like, you know what? Because they were probably going to get a receiver second or third round if they don't make this trade. I liked a couple of guys in the draft. Anthony Miller I liked a lot. Christian Kirk, if he was there in the second round. I figured that would be the way I'd want to go. Get a guy you can control for 4 or 5 years, young guy with some upside. Then I thought about it and I went to bed and slept on it, woke up, had some coffee. And I kind of like it. I've changed my mind. I think Bryant, what his floor is. He's proven he can play in the NFL. He can prove he can catch the ball and he can score. He's a first down guy. And he should be motivated. This is last year's contract. Obviously, I think he's kind of one of those guys to me. It seems like he likes his money. He likes to get a deal. He's going to play hard for a new deal. And this is the year to get him. This is the year of his best, Martavis Bryant. So it's great for their system. I think it fits in well. You can move Jordy to the slot now. Martavis give you a deep threat, which this team hasn't had a deep threat now I don't know how long. So
come on, the Johnny Holton.
Yeah, Johnny Holton. Yeah. But so I like it. I think I understand third round maybe a bit much. I'm sure Pittsburgh didn't have a lot of offers. I think everyone knew they want to get rid of him. They know the drugs and the marijuana issues and blasting teammates on Twitter and not. He's a little rough. He's a little rough around the edges. But, to me, if a guy can make plays, you live with that kind of stuff. I think he fits in well, be motivated, and you know what he can do. Like, if you draft a guy in the second, third round, you hope you know what he can do.
Yeah.
But you're not sure. You're kind of, this guy, this is the worst case scenario. This is what this guy can do. So I like it. I've gone 180 and changed my opinion.
And I guess if you're the Raiders, and if you really were going to draft Kolton Miller at number 10, well, what you did is you drafted him 5 picks later, you added Martavis Bryant for free, and you got a 5th-round pick. So I guess if you look at that perspective, if they really were just on the verge of settling for Kolton Miller at 10, I mean, he basically Bryant's free.
Yeah, they made no pretense about the whole best player available thing.
We need a tackle.
We need a tackle. We're getting a tackle. I mean, obviously, I think Roquan Smith would have been the exception, trading up for Chubb if that was ever going to happen, but that was a slim chance of that happening. So other than that, they're pretty much locked in on a tackle. And Derwin James was the one guy the scouts were like, hey, man, what about Derwin James? They're like, shut up. Okay, never mind. So, I think that was clearly what they were going to do. So,
we referenced this earlier. What does Kolton Miller's drafting, what does that mean for Donald Penn, a guy who, and we talked about, he held out last year, got the raise. He goes into this year, about $8.5 million or so.
Yeah.
You talked about it. He's not guaranteed a roster spot. I mean, they'd have some dead cap money, but they could save about $5 million if they decided to move on. And you listen to Gruden talk today. What's kind of the first things he mentions about Donald Penn is, he's rehabbing from a foot injury. He's been a good Raider.
Right.
I think was kind of the way he phrased it. Definitely no commitment from this team moving forward for Donald Penn.
No, I mean Donald's 35. He's coming off a Liz Frank injury, so I think it's always a little dicey. But I think, to me, he's always coming in camp in good shape. I think he's motivated now. I think, and you'll see that. I know last week he came into the mini camp, did more than they thought he was going to do. They pretty much wrote him off as being his rehab stage, but he's pushing himself pretty hard. So I think he knows that all eyes are on him. I think obviously today he's your best left tackle. I think he probably will be. So in my book, I think they'll wait and see what he can do. They're not going to cut him, I think, right away. But obviously, if for some reason Miller outplays him and they can go with Miller right away, then they definitely will cut Donald Penn and save $5 million. But I think they like Donald. I think they're probably not planning for him in 2019. But I think this year he still has a shot, and I think he definitely knows that. And I think if you look at his history, he has a chip on his shoulder, and he works hard when he's here, and he's in good shape. I think he'll be fine. So I still think Donald will be all right. But clearly, this is definitely a move where it's not guaranteed. Donald definitely is he's on the bubble a little bit, and he knows that, I think. So I think it'll be good to see what he does in the rest of the offseason.
Well, and you look at it. If they were to decide to move on from Donald Penn, what does that do to your offensive line? Okay, you put in Kolton Miller at left tackle, then you still have pretty much an unsettled right tackle position. I mean, I don't think they love their options at right tackle. So, I mean, your best offensive line, if you take money out of it, probably is, at least for 2018, Donald Penn at left tackle and Kolton Miller at right tackle. He gets his experience. They move on from Penn. They find a right tackle next year, and then he can shift over.
Though I'm told they may get one today, so they may. There's a couple of guys they like from some small schools, so I think Donald really will probably
He'll be watching the draft.
Put his remote through the TV if that happens. But I just think that they can still draft some more tackles. I think, and to me, it's more not a knock against Donald, but like you mentioned, the guys who were here last year, the backup linemen, the Sharps, the Kirklands. I'm not saying which guys are which. I don't really know, but I know that as a whole, the staff was not impressed with the backup linemen last week. The guys who may project as right tackles in the future, left tackles, Alexander's the guy, one of those guys. I just think that they would not, as of right now, as of today, they would not be comfortable going with one of those guys at right tackle. So I think that's why you'll see that maybe draft a guy today also, or definitely tomorrow. But I think that they're not done adding tackles.
Well, and how much does that have to do with just the difference between the kind of guy that Mike Tice liked and the kind of guy that Tom Cable likes?
Oh, I'm sure that's a big part of it. I'm sure all line coaches are different. They all have their own little quirks they like, like Tice is kind of a meathead, like the big guys who kind of just, use their force to kind of assert their will. I think Cable's more of looking for the footwork is big for him, like the zone blocking stuff, likes to change direction. Definitely looking for different kind of skills, I think. And last week, I think is more about, like Gruden mentioned, more about retention. Like, if you retain things they taught you in the classroom, how you did with reps. And so, obviously, these guys didn't do very well. Some guys didn't come in good shape. I think some guys were out. I heard 3 guys were out of shape. So, I think, to me, it's more about that part of it than how you fit right now. I just think it's about, what's your ability to retain stuff you're told, to learn plays quickly, to adjust on the fly, and to kind of be in good shape, which is obviously a big part.
And that was your mini camp of death, right? And
my mini camp of death.
And Darius Latham died.
He died, the poor guy. I think that's 74 guys. I think there's 74 guys in the roster right now.
Yeah, they're going to draft,
13, 12, 13. They're going to sign probably another 10 undrafted guys. So pretty quickly, you're going to have 7, 8 guys who are going to be cut. And Latham was the first one. So I just think that this team, Gruden's made no bones about it. He's not a big fan of the roster. He came in, this is kind of not very good. So he's made a lot of changes already. He signed 20-something new guys, most of them older. Mm-hmm. And I think you'll see more of that. I think you'll see, there are 5, 6, 7, 8 guys who get cut in the next week or so.
All right, well, we talked about what Kolton Miller, how he impacts other guys on the roster. Let's get into Martavis Bryant and how that affects that receiver room. We know that Seth Roberts is a guy that, he's had his moments. I think 2015, 2016 definitely had his moments. Kind of a guy that probably it was almost more of those moments that you made you remember him rather than his overall production. It's the walk-off touchdown against Tampa Bay. It's the fact that they're undefeated when he scores a touchdown. But you go back to the last half of that 2016 season, he disappeared. Even though his end of the season numbers weren't terrible, I pulled up the stat a million times. I think he averaged about 1.7 catches and 19 yards per game over the last 9 games, including the playoffs. Completely disappeared, and then last year was just not there. I mean, he's never been a guy that has great hands. I think early on in his career, he had that kind of redemptive quality where he'd drop a pass and then Derek would go right back to him and then he'd make a big play and he'd kind of help you forget about the play that he didn't make. But he's a guy that now that they brought in Bryant, I know you reported last night that they would like to look into trading him and maybe add another pick.
Yeah, if it's a taker, obviously it won't be easy because I think it's going to make $4 million this year. But what does make it easier is that the Raiders have already paid $2 million of it, so a team picking him up would just have to pay half of his salary. And he's still got like some skills. Obviously, he's shown flashes. I think he made the team as an undrafted guy because he kind of flashed, made some big plays. Yeah. Obviously, those were less and less as time went on. You saw some of the holes in his game. They don't hate him. I think they're not going to cut him, but I think definitely if they can find a taker, they will definitely jump on that and move on from him. I just think that he's a guy who the new staff is like, we're not really sure what this guy brings to the table. So, I mean, I think tomorrow probably like, 6th, 7th round pick. I can definitely see that. I think he's got some value, and especially if Bill Musgrave is on the other end of the phone. Yeah. Bill loves him, so if he can get Denver to jump, and their receivers aren't very good behind the two starters. Their backups aren't very good, so. Maybe you get the Broncos to give you a 7th round pick for Seth, but I would think there'll be a taker at some point. I think he's got enough of he's a great blocker.
Yeah, I was going to say, he does those little things. He's a very good downfield blocker. He's been in his time here. He's been their best downfield blocker among that receiver group.
Well, we look back at some other big runs over the years. You see him taking somebody out. So, and I think he's a good guy. He's a good team guy. I think he's a smart guy. So I think maybe he'll say he hasn't reached his potential yet. He's still kind of on the rise. So I think there's enough there for another team to say, you know what, let's take a flyer on him, see what we got.
All right. Well, what are you looking at? I mean, we talked about other options for day 2. Could still add an offensive tackle. We know they need to go defense, and so I think if they drafted a tackle in the 2nd round, you would probably hear Twitter explode over here. But
plus, Donald will drive his truck through the front for the front plate glass window. But I think safety. They'll address safety. They're going to address linebacker. I know. They don't usually draft inside linebackers in the past because they have some weird thing about that. But I think with the new staff intact and Gruden here, I think they got to draft someone that can come in and make an impact at linebacker. So there's some guys there. I think Malik Jefferson from Texas, I think, is on their radar. I think the Stanford safety, Justin Reed, is a guy they like a lot. So I would think one of those guys, maybe the Alabama safety, Ronnie Harrison. And then that's for round 2. And round 3, I think, obviously, at that point, you really are going best player available, because your board becomes kind of a mess and names are kind of flying around. So really the guys who are still at the top of your board at that point are the guys you take. I mentioned those tackles might be there for them. They like those two small school tackles they like.
One thing that was interesting on day 1 of the draft is the schedule called for both John Gruden and Reggie McKenzie to meet with the media, and it ended up being just McKenzie. What did that signal to you? To me, it's okay. If I'm Gruden, I still got work to do. I'll let McKenzie go handle that. Do you agree with that? Is this? Are we getting some clear signs already that Gruden is really running the show here?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I mean, obviously reporters are always jaded, so when I saw that, I'm like, oh, what's going on? Where's Gruden? I'm like, it's a big deal. And it's really not a big deal. I mean, obviously, they gave us a guy to talk about the picks, happened to be the GM. So I think Gruden was on the phone, was busy. I mean, I never really got asked, but I never really got an answer. Like, they're like, whatever. It's not a big deal. But my take is that he was on the phone. I think they were trying to maybe get back into the first round late last night, and maybe he's talking to someone. But I think Reggie, like I mentioned it last week, I think Reggie and John are doing okay. I think it's a weird dynamic. Obviously, when you come in and you're the guy, and the old guy is the GM who got you all the players who are on your roster, and you don't like the roster. So, but I think both guys are pretty easygoing. They both are trying to make the best of it. I think they worked well together. I think today Gruden praised Reggie for kind of being calm in the crazy war room. Obviously, there's a lot of bodies in there with the staff and the coaches and trade calls coming in, moving down. And he said Reggie did a nice job of kind of making things when processed correctly, and everything kind of went the way it's supposed to go. So I think they're okay. I think that maybe people want to say, oh, this is his pick, that was his pick, this is his guy, that's his guy. But probably it's just shades of gray. I think they all have pretty much a good idea what they want to do, and they both. I'm sure Reggie wanted to tackle also. Reggie looks at, hey, Donald Penn's 35 years old, and the backups are question marks, and we get a guy who Tom Cable swears will be a big-time left tackle in a couple of years, then we should do it. So I'm sure Reggie wasn't totally opposed to the move like some people would think he was, like he wanted a defensive guy and John wanted offense. I'm sure that's just, whatever. I think it's just shades of gray.
Yeah, kind of the timeline of the night, that Martavis Bryant deal kind of happened, like as you guys were heading back for the press conference, right?
Yeah. So maybe that was it. Maybe that was John was just making sure that it was going through. But yeah, we walked into the auditorium and to waiting for who we thought was Gruden and Reggie, and then Reggie walked in and I think popped up that the Steelers announced they had made a trade. So yeah, I just think that they. Reggie knows that I think John's not happy with the roster, and so I think Reggie's trying to help him get the guys he wants to get. So we'll see where it is a year from now. This year, I think it'll be no problem as far as them working together. But a year from now, we'll see. I'm sure they'll reevaluate, and we'll see what happens next year. I'm sure. Another thing is, like, right now, all the scouts in their room, they're not going to be here much longer.
They're coaching for their job. I mean, they're working for their jobs. I mean, they've got to prove themselves that they're, they almost. I mean, it's a weird position because as a scout, right, you wanna express your opinion, but you're kind of in a position now where you want Gruden to keep you on the job, right? So you almost have to try to mold your opinion into his opinion and try to find a way to express a little bit, but also be like, yeah, John, yeah, exactly. What I want, do what you want.
I agree, and I think some of those scouts that know they're already gone. Some of those scouts don't even have any illusions of trying to win over Gruden. They pretty much realize that in a couple of weeks he has guys coming in that are his guys. Everybody wants to bring in their guys. Like Reggie, when they came in, that's my guy, this is my guy. Everybody wants your own guys, and you come in and you may want to incorporate some of the old guys, but really you want your own people you're familiar with for years. And John's been plotting this, for a while. His comeback had coaches on speed dial, his staff. He was waiting to call whenever he came back. I'm sure he had his scouts. He lined up. Dave Rosano and he are very tight. He brought Dave back. So I'm sure they have a plan for John has a plan for what the war room will look like next year. It'll be a lot different than it did last night and today.
Is there any names that you are really looking at right now that are as soon as all these guys get signed, any surprise names? I mean, obviously back end of the roster guys are certainly in danger of losing out on their roster spot. But is there any surprise names you could see that could jump up and might not expecting to be out of a job next week?
No, like I thought for a while, Jared Cook could be in trouble because he has a big salary cap number. But from what I hear, I think he's in good shape. So I think we talked about Donald being a guy because of you can save $5 million. Talked about Seth Roberts, you can save $2 if you move him. Otherwise, there's guys like Antonio Hamilton, Dexter McDonald, guys who've been on the roster for 1 or 2 years, never quite made their mark. Yeah. I'm not sure they'll have a chance to make their mark going forward. So I think those kind of guys who they'll recognize their names as being on the roster for a little while, but not as far as like having an impact. Yeah, so I think those guys are in trouble. But as far as big names, I know they're trying to make some room salary cap wise. But other than Donald and Seth, I can't really think of anyone who I think might be in trouble. Well,
and they got creative, obviously, with the word that Rodney Hudson's deal's been restructured, saving $5 million or something in salary cap, and that's huge. I mean, you can obviously he's a guy you don't want to move on from, but if he's a guy that you're able to get creative like that and find some extra money, I mean that may be something they have to look into more because I mean they don't have a ton of space out there, and I mean they got to sign this draft class, they've got to be able to bring in undrafted guys, and they want to be able to. I mean, we know John loves veterans. If guys become available as other teams purge their roster, I'm sure he wants to be able to be aggressive there too.
Yeah, they're definitely strapped. They definitely don't have. They're definitely up against it. Like everything they do, they have to stop and say, "Wait, let's look at the money." I'm sure John Gruden came into the first meeting, the first draft meeting, say the last month, and trying to get a board going. I'm sure he's like, "Hey, I want to get Chubb. Let's move up, whatever it takes." Like, well, besides the draft pick cost, we can't really afford him if he's at a top 4 salary. Like that, that won't work in our books. So that's why any of the trade rumors with him really kind of involved him falling to 6 or even 7, and then you can maybe make it work. But like at 4 it wasn't going to happen. And so I just think I'm sure that wasn't great for him to hear. I'm sure Gruden came in with his big contract and big goals and wants to shape the roster as fast as he can. But there's some handcuffs there. He can't do whatever he wants to do. He has to talk to Reggie and look at the books and say, what's this guy going to be like? Like DeVar Bowman. Paul Guthrie wants him back, but they only want him back at a certain price, and that price is not. They haven't agreed on that price yet, and they may not. But I mean, I can't just say, okay, you know what? We'll give you the extra $1 million you want. That's fine. That's not going to happen. So I just think that those are going to be tough decisions going forward as far as guys they want to bring in.
Yeah, those days of just throwing money around. I mean, you look at some of the deals they've had to, some of the moves they've had to make are because they gave, Reggie kind of rewarded some guys that he liked. He likes to reward those undrafted guys that he kind of finds as gems. I mean, we're talking about Seth Roberts, we're talking about Marquette King, guys who ended up getting deals that were more than they ended up being worth, and that's where some guys are in trouble on the roster, and they don't have those extra dollars to throw around right now.
Yeah, I think going forward, like you look at the roster, obviously we mentioned Carr and Mack. I think we might see a move at some point, not now, probably maybe, who knows, next draft maybe, but they look at the roster and they see the three guys in the middle. They see, Hudson, Osemele, and Jackson. A lot of money tied up to your center and two guards, and that's not really ideal. I mean, I know they're all great, but just think if you wanted to trade one of those guys, you get really good value, I think, and then you would also free up a lot of money. And at this point, they're not doing that now. I think that's nothing we're talking about doing today or tomorrow, but I think that's somewhere on the ledger, somewhere like, going forward, what's our best move to kind of like free us up a little bit and kind of change the dynamic of our roster? And those are your tradable assets. Those three guys will definitely get you back a lot of value and solve a lot of your money problems.
Well, and especially when you look at Osemele and Hudson, both those guys, there's no more guaranteed dollars on their deal. If either of those, well, I don't know what with Hudson's restructure there might be, but
right.
With Osemele, I mean, if there's a slip up at all, if he has a bad season, I mean, then that becomes another discussion where, okay, do we move on and save the money? I mean, that's kind of the way NFL contracts work. I mean, these guys are basically put under pressure. We always talk about in all sports a contract year. Yeah. These guys are in contract years every year.
Yeah, exactly.
Essentially.
There's no guaranteed money. I'm sure. I know Gruden came in. He loves those guys. I'll make that clear. He loves those three guys. Yeah. But I'm sure he looks at the numbers and the dollars. And he's like, holy crap. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, I just think that's not ideal. I think he realizes that. I think that's probably at some point going to be an issue that they're kind of trying to solve, but not today.
All right, let's head over to Twitter, and we'll take some questions here before we run out. From G. Saucedo, do you know if Kolton Miller won't attend OTAs because of the UCLA quarter semester, all that whole deal? I think that's done, right?
They fixed it, yeah. That was a problem last year with Eddie Vanderdoes, but they fixed it. So Reggie was asked about it last night, and no. So he'll be here for the whole deal.
All right, that's very good. That rule was dumb. I mean,
it was dumb.
Stanford guys were in that same deal, and I mean, it was like I think if you had graduated already, you were fine, but otherwise, it's. I mean, God, these guys they're moving on to their career. I mean, it's
a whole new life. Yeah.
All right, another question here from Jay Munoz 93. Based on the talent level of this year's draft, what position can the Raiders afford to pass on and still get a quality player at in the later rounds?
That's cool. I think running back is the one that comes to mind. That's pretty well stocked. And then Gruden said he wants one. He likes running backs in this draft. So I think that's a position you'll see them probably not address today, but definitely tomorrow. I think they're definitely going to add one, or maybe even two running backs.
Yep. All right, another question here from Hamish Amil. That's the guy that named our podcast. You got the free subscription.
Nice.
He says, how likely do you think it is that Reggie's able to move Seth Roberts today? If the Raiders were to trade back into the second round to grab someone that's falling, who would you see it being? Possibly Landry. So we'll start with the first part of that. How likely is it, do you think they're able to move Roberts? You kind of addressed that earlier, where you think at some point, maybe not.
Yeah, I don't think people think it's impossible, but I think he's got some value. And I think the fact that $2 million is already paid is big. So I'm not saying it's likely, but I think it's definitely possible for like a late round pick.
And then the other part of it, if they were able to trade back trade up in the second, trade back in the second to grab someone that's falling, who could you see them targeting? Could you see them targeting a Landry?
Yeah, I haven't heard the name a lot, but I was saying he's the guy, the skill set they need in another pass rusher. So I think he's an attractive name. And some of the other guys I mentioned, the linebacker, the other safeties. So I think definitely defense. They're going to definitely try to address defense today.
All right, we've got a couple more questions here from here's one from Puget Zulu. Has Reggie talked to Martavis Bryant about extending his contract, or get him on the phone already? Right, extend that contract. What do you think? What do you think about extending his contract, and how does the Bryant acquisition affect Amari and Jordy's wide receiver roles? You mentioned that earlier. That kind of allows them to shift Nelson into the slot, but extension? I don't think they're ready to talk that. Right?
No, I think you got to make sure that everything's cool as far as the whole being able to buy marijuana here in California. That's a big wrinkle. I would be a little worried about that one. But
because okay, we know it's legal in California. It doesn't mean it's legal in the NFL.
No, just make sure you got to get that one to drive home with him. Probably like, hey, you can buy it, but you just can't smoke it. But
what are you going to buy it for if you can't smoke it?
Exactly, I know. I think part of the attractiveness of getting Bryant is you want to kind of dangle the carrot for him. I think you want to make him play for a deal. I'm not sure you want to give it to him now. I think you want to have that edge and see what he can do out. He has something to prove. If you give him the attention now, you kind of That wouldn't be a good idea,
No.
now. But he's like,
No.
he's like, I am gonna buy some marijuana. I'm gonna celebrate. Thank you. So no, that's a bad idea. Bad idea.
All right. If we don't land, this is from the Quan report. If they don't land Mo Hurst, what's the backup plan to solve the interior push problem?
It's a good question. There's just another Stanford kid. I think Phillips is his name.
Yeah, Harrison Phillips.
He's on their radar, but at that point, they probably just go with the veterans. I think our good guy late. I'm not sure there's anyone that really jumps out, but yeah, I wasn't surprised they kind of re-signed Jelly, but they like him against the run game, and so I think they'll just kind of mix and match some guys. But obviously, I think if Hurst is there, and obviously has the health concerns, that's kind of a risk. But they like him; he's a good fit, so I definitely think his name you could see today.
I mean, the whole philosophy the last 2 years seems to be just we're going to outscore people. We're going to just build up that offense and try to outscore people, right?
Yeah, and Gruden's definitely an offensive guy. There's no doubt about that. So I think you saw last night. He's like, there's some really good defensive players on that board. He's like, nah, taking a tackle. Me and Tom Cable are taking a tackle. So at some point you got to address defense, but who knows?
All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up here. We got to get ready for round 2 and 3 of the NFL draft. But we appreciate all of you listening. And the good news, as people have been asking us all week, we are now on Apple Podcasts. We're also on Google Play. We're on Stitcher. I think we're pretty much everywhere now. So whatever podcast platform, whatever app you use, you should be able to look up State of the Nation, the Athletics Raiders podcast, and we're there. And
very soon we'll have T-shirts. We're going to have mugs. We're going to have everything. We're going to have stickers. We're going global.
Wow. I didn't know about all that.
I have big dreams.
Cool. And then another note is we actually have a little discount code set up for you guys. If you want to subscribe to The Athletic to read all of Vic's Raiders content, you can go to theathletic.com/State of the Nation. You can get a 1-week free trial and then get 30% off annual plan. So not bad there.
That's nice.
All right. We'll talk to you guys again later.
All right, guys. Take care.